So welcome to this short chat about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That too is a mouthful. From henceforward, I'll refer to it as the UN SDGs, just so you know. And they're up on the wall behind me. How many people here have heard of those before? Wow, quite a few. That's awesome. That's really good. And can I ask some of you how you heard about those, how they came across the path? Anyone?
ABC Radio.
Really? Great. LinkedIn? Yep. A few more over here. Yep.
I've got a general interest in anything related to sustainability and renewables, so you can't avoid them.
No, that's very true. So in 2015, I was working on a project, doing an education course to creative industry students at the University of Newcastle. And I was working with this amazing lady, and I was rabbiting on about purpose in business. And I just said, I wish there was some international framework out there that could really talk to the positive and negative impact that businesses have on our community and world at large. And she went, oh, there is. I was like, oh, okay. And she told me in 2012, the UN had gotten together and they wanted to talk about how they could solve some of the really big problems. And these big problems were around ending poverty, protecting the planet, ensuring all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. And then in 2015, they actually all signed on, all members of the UN, to make these goals happen. So let's have a think about peace and prosperity. We seem to have regressed a bit there recently, don't you think? So between all of the world events, many of these amazing goals have slid. But that's also to be expected in a disruptive world that we live in. So it's all about resetting that intention, working out how we can make a difference and keep moving forward. So in 2022, many organisations, large and small, have become aware of the goals and are trying to find a way to sort of measure the success that they have in implementing them. So not just talking about it, not just making it marketing spiel. It's not about that. It's about highlighting what you're doing in your business in a way that you are willing to measure and share and change. So it's a big ask. At the Business Centre, we identified 4 goals, and we've got them stuck up on the walls for you tonight so you can have a look at those. First goal is goal 4, quality education. Second goal is goal 8, and that's decent work and economic growth. Goal 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure. And goal 12, responsible consumption and production. So we impact on those through our business advisory work, our courses. We talk to individual business owners. We talk to people that are starting business, growing business, and seeing how they can tap into these. We haven't turned it into a cult. We're not about that. We're just trying to raise awareness and see how people can genuinely connect there. And it's all with the idea of improving the climate, communities, health, education, and economic growth in our communities. Okay, so we might meet Jonathan. So Jonathan, you have quite the title. It is Senior Project Officer, Sustainability Advantage, Climate Change and Sustainability, Department of Planning and Environment. Whoa!
It's a mouthful.
It sure is a mouthful. So welcome to the Business Centre.
Thanks.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in this field?
Oh, right. So I guess when I finished high school, now a long time ago, I was really keen on getting into renewable energy.
Yep.
But that turned out to be not such a good idea in Australia. Probably still isn't such a good idea in Australia. And so I found myself going into sustainable building design. And that was a good idea. So back then, the Green Building Council, some of you may have heard, was just kicking off and things were going really well. So we had this really interesting position where the average building stock in Australia was very poor performing, but a lot of people were really pushing the envelope. So even at a global level, there was a lot of really exciting happening in the built environment.
Yeah.
And so it was great to be there. And so I was in there for a good 6 years before doing my, the usual Australian jaunt over to London and worked over there for a couple of years, and then came back, and then I just wanted to be on the other side of the fence.
Yep.
So being a consultant, you do all these amazing designs, you have these great ideas, but sometimes it just doesn't come to fruition. Sometimes the bottom line trumps everything else. So
yep.
I jumped over the fence to be on the client side of things, and actually worked for an organisation some of you may have heard of called Crown Casino. And Crown Casino sustainability is a bit of an oxymoron in a lot of people's minds, but definitely wasn't involved in the social side of things back then. We didn't talk about SDGs back then, but I was on the environmental side. So Crown obviously had a lot of money, had a lot of, gave me a lot of rope in terms of reducing emissions, and so that was a really amazing experience to be able to influence such a large organisation in that respect. And then I got sick of the Melbourne weather and came up to this beautiful place called Newcastle, and working for Lake Macquarie City Council and now state government. So having that experience working in a small consultancy firm, a large corporate, really gives me a really good background in terms of how I can now help organisations.
Yeah.
So my day job is working medium to large organisations across the Hunter, be more sustainable. But a lot of that is directly applicable to SMEs. So
it is, and that's why we're really excited to have Jonathan here, because he's got so much practice in identifying and implementing these theories into businesses, and they can be done in large and of course micro and small.
Yep.
Just fantastic. So why don't we dive into these 17 goals?
Sure.
Go for it.
Go for it. So obviously I won't take you all through every detail of all of them, but I thought we'll just do a bit of an overview of the goals, and then we might describe a bit about what's happening at a global level, and then gradually bring it down. So we'll go on a bit of a journey today in terms of big picture and what's happening down to Australia and down to the Hunter region and down to your own organisation.
Great.
Which would be a cool journey to take. So obviously the first one, no poverty. So this is obviously a big one in third world countries, but it's actually quite relevant to Australia as well. There's a lot of homeless people. There's a lot of people living below the relative poverty line. So obviously $1 per day doesn't apply to the Hunter region, but certainly people who can't afford basic needs are considered in poverty. Zero hunger is another big one. A lot of people go malnourished, but there's a lot of obesity issues in Australia as well. Good health and well-being, both mental and physical, ensuring that we're all accessing the adequate resources we need to be physically and mentally fit and healthy. Quality education, ensuring that we all have access to primary, pre-primary education, tertiary education, high school and tertiary education as well, and then access to further education as we go along. Gender equality, obviously a big one. In the news quite a lot of late, ensuring that there is no gender pay gap and there are equality of representation of women in all industries and government. Clean water and sanitation. Again, this is more of an issue, you would think it's more of an issue in third world countries, low-income countries, but it is actually a goal that we're not hitting yet in Australia as a whole. And so it's very interesting to see where we're at on that one, but we'll dive into that one a bit later. Affordable and clean energy, obviously a big one. Making sure that our energy that we need is reliable and affordable, but also that it's reducing its impact on climate change. Decent work and economic growth. So ensuring that everyone has access to decent work and complying with human rights and labour rights, but also ensuring that we're that work is actually fulfilling the needs of those individuals as well. Industry, innovation, infrastructure. Brooke, you said this is one of the ones that you focus on as well.
Yep.
Ensuring that what industries do we represent? What industries do we work in? And what industries do we want to work in to create a sustainable future? And then investing R&D into those industries where we want to head to and making sure that the infrastructure then supports us to be able to work there. Reduced inequalities. So they pulled out gender equality as a big one to focus on. But there are a whole range of other inequalities that are out there as well. So all those socioeconomic indicators, whether it's race, whether it's age, whether it's cultural or linguistically diverse people, all the minority groups, we need to ensure that there's equality in that regard. Sustainable cities and communities. So making sure that the cities and where we live are supporting everything that we need, and it's supporting a healthy lifestyle and supporting a sustainable lifestyle as well. Responsible consumption and production is another one. Making sure that what we're doing, the resources we're consuming, aren't out of balance with what nature, the earth, can provide.
And that's harking back to last month's topics, the circular economy. We're trying to really spread some awareness around. It's certainly not just about recycling. It's about developing products and services with everything in mind. And so they can become reusable components, renewed components, working a bit smarter there in product design.
13 is climate action. So that's about mitigating climate change, but also adapting to climate change as well. We're certainly not going to keep the world within 1.5 degrees, and we're already seeing changes occur. So it's how do we adapt to climate change as it does occur. Life below water, all the nature-based systems that are below water, ensuring that they're thriving and surviving and thriving, as well as life on land, which is everything above water as well. Peace, justice and strong institutions. So making sure that all our governments and our justice systems are fair and equitable and accessible and support everything that we've talked about. And then finally, 17 is partnerships for the goals, which is we're all working together to achieve these outcomes.
Yeah.
That's about as short a summary as I could make it. Obviously,
It's pretty tight.
there's a lot more to go into, but yeah.
That's well done. So at state government, who you work for, how do they sort of fit into being a partner in that way?
So there's no formal adoption. So the Australian government's ratified the Sustainable Development Goals. They're one of the 193 countries, which, by the way, just big picture, good news story. Being able to get 193 countries to agree on this was a pretty amazing. I can't get my family to agree on what we're having for dinner tonight, so it was pretty amazing. So, and not just that. So the Millennium Development Goals were around originally since 2000. Then in 2015, as Brooke said, they revised it. So they revised it to ensure that they were all interconnected. And they also revised it to bring on business. And that's why we're here tonight, because the focus of the Millennium Development Goals was governments and individuals. And they realised that there's no way we're going to achieve that without the role of business. And so there's a huge focus on the SDGs for business. And that's why they brought it in. So bringing this out was a great idea.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, what was the question? I went on a bit of a tangent. What was the question again?
I've never been known to go on a tangent.
Yeah, right.
So it was more just about how working for state government.
Yes, so the Australian government's ratified that. That's right.
Yep.
And the New South Wales government has not officially said that we're adopting the SDGs and this is our framework.
Yep.
But the Department of Planning and Environment, who I work for, has. And so individual departments are adopting it as they see fit. Department of Education are using it in their curriculum. So my organisation, or the team that I work for, is specifically adopting the SDGs as the framework to define sustainability and therefore to develop strategies to go about achieving it.
Yeah, that's fantastic, especially to hear about the Education Department as well. Yeah, great. Well, how's COVID impacted the goals?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and unfortunately, it's not a happy answer. So we started with the SDGs being an amazing, we're going to go a bit of an arc. We're going to go down now in terms of things not being so happy, and we'll come up at the end. But overall, things aren't going so well. So at a very global level, even before COVID, we weren't achieving any of the targets. I mean, it's only been 5 years between 2015 and when COVID hit, but we weren't achieving them. And the numbers around what needs to be invested to achieve the SDGs is crazy. It's like I don't know, trillions of dollars. And unfortunately, when COVID hit, things got worse. So for the first time in 50 years, global poverty went up. People couldn't get access to standard vaccines. And so, and like all major issues like climate change and pandemics, the people who are hit hardest are the most vulnerable. And there's a lot of vulnerable people out there. There's 1 billion slum dwellers who got heavily impacted by COVID. There's 1.7 billion children who didn't go to school for 2 years. And 300 million of those children get their food at the schools that they go to.
Yeah.
So they couldn't get the food that they were given. And then ultimately, climate change, even though there was a reduction in emissions, that was just a blip. But the overall, because there's a great lag in terms of what's happening and the impacts of climate change, it was, over the last couple of years was discovered that climate change is happening a lot more severely than we originally thought. So it was actually going the opposite direction. So the overall picture of COVID is not quite so good.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's right. do you want to can we have a quick look at Australia?
Please.
All right.
Yeah.
So in 2020, so it's based on 2020 figures. So it's 1 year of COVID. We'll get 2021 figures probably in the next couple of months. But as you can see, green's good, yellow's not so good, orange not so good, red's bad. So there's not a lot of good going on here. This is Australia. And surprisingly, like we were talking about before, good health and well-being, great, tick, going up, fantastic. But things like clean water and sanitation, no poverty, hunger. We can understand how life below water and life on land, things aren't going so well. But hunger and responsible consumption, I guess, not so bad. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. We would think we would have that covered in a rich country like Australia. Yep. Same with quality education. So when you delve down into it, there's a lot sort of heading in the wrong direction. I mean, the arrows sort of pointing diagonally, reasonably good, but there's a couple of arrows going down. So biodiversity is going down, and reduced inequalities. In a country like Australia, inequality is going up. So I was quite surprised to see this, and it'll be interesting to see when the figures come out. Yeah. I think in the next couple of months for a year later. Yeah.
I'd love to know that direct link between inequality and fear and how that all ties together after the COVID.
Yes.
COVID, that
yes, exactly. Yeah.
Quite amplified.
Yeah, definitely.
Are we able to ask a question? Okay.
Sorry, yes, Australia is ranked 35 out of 165 countries that were able to be assessed. So so I think there's...
So we're performing really well compared to the vast majority.
Exactly. So globally, we're not doing so well, right? So in a bad environment, Australia's not doing so bad. Yeah.
We've been amongst the worst of the scale first world because
OECD.
Yeah. And also, I just wanted to know, it's one thing to get countries to sign up to this sort of agreement, but sort of accountability is there both on the national level and I guess below that, like industry, small businesses, individuals?
It's a good question. So even though countries have ratified it and signed up to it, and that's one of the criticisms, there's no formal mechanism for what happens if things just keep going the way they are.
Yeah.
Yep.
You mentioned assessment. This is probably opening up the can of worms or whatever, but how is it assessed who assesses it?
So the UN assesses this. So this is independently assessed by a body at the UN.
Right.
And Australia is required. Australia submits data to them on an annual basis in terms of what's been going on. Yeah.
At a local level, there's a group, the UN SDG task force, and you guys are putting together, you're part of that, of course.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Putting together sort of different metrics as a local region, how we can measure it together. So individually as our own businesses, but also together as a whole community, which is going to be pretty cool.
That's a question there.
Yeah, I was thinking about the ranking. Something tells me that we should compare that to the economic ranking.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Pretty sure Australia is higher than 35.
Okay.
But I might be wrong there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
Higher than 35.
It should, would be a lot more relevant to have a OECD ranking. Yeah.
And also, with the greatest respect, I think Australia's lagging United States by about 4 years, Europe by about 6 years, and Singapore by about 8 years in progressing a legislative agenda that would compel organisations to start thinking about those.
Yep.
We are seriously behind the 8 ball on the legislative agenda.
With the stats that go to the UN, is there a standard there, or do they just sort of hand over what is necessary? No.
I'm pretty sure there's a standard format that they request the data to come in, and it's all based on the targets, which we'll go into in a bit.
Yeah.
But whether or not all that information is available, some of the information is not available. So you can see responsible consumption and production, the information is not available at the moment because we just don't track that.
Enough.
Yeah, enough. Yeah.
Enough in depth.
Yeah, but Brooke touched on the Hunter SDG task force. So a couple of years ago, a bunch of organisations got together, most of those ones that you can see there, and created an initiative where, okay, no one really understands the SDGs, nor do they understand how does it apply to the hunter or organisations. So let's get together and help educate people. And so we've formed the Hunter SDG task force. So check out that website. I think, Brooke, you can send out these slides afterwards. But at the moment, and Brooke mentioned this before, we're localising the SDGs. And so there's 169 targets underneath those 17 goals. So under each goal is like, between 5 and 10 specific targets. Obviously, not all of them are relevant. And so we're going through this process of, okay, what are the most relevant targets for the hunter? And then gathering that data, and we'll make that publicly available so that we know what is a sustainable hunter and how are we going.
It's really interesting for this region because obviously the coal, obviously that's one, but then you think about all of the agriculture in surrounding areas and how much that can impact as well in changing practice there. Yeah. Not that that's a particular interest of mine or anything.
Yeah.
It's okay. Why don't we delve into the 169 targets?
Yeah.
Let's not go through all of them, but let's have a crack.
And I'll just give you an idea of what they are rather than go through all of them. Because like I said, underneath each of these, there's 5 to 10 targets and then the metrics for that. So for example, no poverty is an easy one. So it'd be the number of homeless people. So, and the target would be, we should have a target in Australia, in the Hunter region. There are no homeless people. There is no people without a home, right? And then the metric is the number of people per 1,000 population or 100,000 population that are homeless. That's one example. Yep. Climate action is another one. Greenhouse gas emissions per capita, and our target should be maintain emission reduction profile in line with 1.5 degrees, as an example. What's another one? Sustainable councils and communities is another good one. Public transport, for example. That's always a bugbear of people in the Hunter region. The number of accessible and public transport rides per hour per 1,000 population, that kind of thing. And the public transport target should be make public transport options suitably available for 60% of the population, or something like that. And so each of the 17 goals have a ridiculous number of targets, but obviously a lot of them are not relevant to Australia and a lot of them are not relevant to the hunter. And then taking the next step of, is it relevant to your organisation? You need to go through the process of localising them.
So is that the way you see businesses sort of identifying and aligning with meaning in going through that process?
Definitely. Yeah. So, do you want to step into the how do we make it meaningful?
Yeah.
I guess probably a good place to start is, okay, why should you care about this? And there's a couple of really compelling reasons. And I don't even have the one in there of just being a good corporate citizen. Obviously, that's a good place to start. But from a purely economic business success perspective, there's 5 pretty good reasons to do it. And the first one's about future business opportunities. We talked about there's trillions of dollars required to be invested to solve the issues around SDGs, and those trillions of dollars will go to businesses that can come up with these solutions.
Yeah.
Enhancing the value of corporate sustainability probably can be rewritten better, but it's basically, okay, beyond normal corporate sustainability reporting, actually when all the externalities around climate change and impacts on nature become internalized, which they're currently not, so when they're actually accounted for and in costs, if you are already ahead of the game here, you will be at the head of the game financially. So you'll be much more, efficient as a business. Strengthening stakeholder relations and keeping pace with policy development. So that's you're better placed working with your customers and your stakeholders and government, but also you're mitigating your risk because you're ahead of the game as well. So if there's any policy changes, you won't be negatively impacted. You'll be positively impacted. Stabilizing societies and markets. You can't have an efficient economy or a functioning economy if we're in a positive 4-degree world. It just won't happen if there's riots in the streets because social inequality is so great. So obviously there's an imperative there. And using a common language and a shared purpose. So this is about, okay, how do you communicate to your stakeholders? And using the language of the SDGs enables you to do that in a way that everyone understands, particularly once everyone is commonly using the SDGs.
Yeah.
But sorry, Book, to get to your point, to get to your question. So, okay, SDGs, great, global, Australia, Hunter, that sounds good. But what does this mean for my business? Particularly, what does this mean for me as an SME? And the good news is that a lot of the work that we do with large corporations, medium to large corporations, is directly relevant to SMEs. And the resources available for you are just as good and just as applicable. And so the two main ones there are the SDG Compass and the SDG Action Manager. And the process is quite simple. It's a 5-step process. And step 1, like with anything, is you've got to understand it.
Yep.
And there are a huge amount of resources available for you to be able to do that. And the UN pays lots of money to some really good communications and training people to help you. Then you need to define your priorities. And this is probably the most critical step. You need to not think about the whole SDGs. You need to identify what is the most relevant to your business, what can you directly influence, and then prioritize them. Because there's no way you're going to tackle 17 goals. You're not going to tackle 169 targets. Exactly what Brooke and the gang here have done. You prioritize them down to 4, and then underneath those 4, she'll have identified which of the targets are most relevant. And that's what you need to do.
And we're still going through the process of trying to work out how we're going to measure those and be transparent about those as well. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we'll be picking your brain on that.
Okay, good. And then once you prioritize your targets and goals and targets, you then set your goals. So you're going to do such and such by what time, and making sure those, the standard process of setting goals, making sure they're smart at the same time. You then have to integrate that. So it's all well and good for you as the leader of your organisation to say, we're doing this, but you've got to integrate it into your procurement, your HR, make sure your staff's trained on SDGs when they come on board, operations, risk management, your supply chain, stakeholder management, making sure that all your stakeholders are involved in this journey because you can't do it by yourselves.
We're a bit excited today in our team meeting because 4 people stuck their hands up to start a committee on this. So we could get together as a working team, and then we're going to take that to our board, get them on board. I'm not doing bad pun on purpose. And then we're going to bring that back through to the organisation as well. So we're going to start with that committee and then, share it.
Yeah, right. And then finally, reporting and communicating. And I was talking to Annette earlier tonight about how do you do this? And you just got to make sure that you're clear about the process you've gone through, you're transparent about what your priorities are and what you're working on, and you communicate it clearly with the language that's being used here. And so SDG Compass provides you with all the information about what is this model and what steps you need to take. And then the SDG Action Manager is a really good online tool to keep track of your progress. Yep. So it helps you go through this process, but also keeps it on online in a dashboard for you. You can put in all your goals and targets and your actions that you're taking towards those, and measure and manage those as time goes on.
Fantastic. Thank you. What else have you got to share with us?
I don't know, actually. No, that's it. Yeah. There you go.
Please.
If that's it's a self-assessment essentially for an organisation.
Yep.
And does that then leave it open to be exploited then by some organisations or whatever like to say, yeah, look at how we're kicking goals on this, get that communication out there. But the reality of what's actually happening is there's not equality in the organisation. There's not, like, do you know what I mean?
100%.
So,
Yep.
like,
Yep.
I guess the question is there a way for some sort of independent assessment or like some sort of gauge there other than, because I feel like this, people could literally exploit just to say, yeah, we're ahead of the game, we're looking at all these goals, but actually,
Totally.
and it's not actually addressing any of the problems in the first place. Like, they spend all their time fluffing with their marketing and communication out to people, but not addressing the issues in the first place.
Definitely. Crown Casino was great at that. Don't ignore all those people that were, telling people what they want to hear. And this is similar to a lot of programs out there. It's a criticism of sustainability in general. It's, you heard the term greenwashing before. This is exactly the same. It's susceptible to that as well. The only there's no independent certification. Like, you can't. I think they're talking about doing it, but at the moment there's certainly not in Australia. It might be in Europe, but you can't get someone to come in and independently certify and say, yes, you've done the SDG process appropriately.
Yep.
But this is what comes back to clear and concise information to your stakeholders. So that step around defining priorities, you shouldn't do that by yourself.
Yeah.
You should do that with your stakeholders. You should do that, include your customers, you should include your suppliers, and you should include your general community members, so that you have a well-rounded picture of it. And then you communicate that. You say, we have identified our priorities with our stakeholders, not just by ourselves. And it gives you a little bit more of a certainty that you've done it correctly.
I guess it makes organisations at the organisation level more accountable, because then if they've told the people outside of the organisation what they're going to do, then they can sort of judge whether that's actually happening.
Exactly, yeah. And what has typically happened up until now is that all that most organisations have done is grab their existing corporate strategy or their existing sustainability strategy, grab some pretty little icons, whacked them next to the existing corporate strategy, and changed nothing. And the greenwashing continues.
That's why when you talk about with meaning so much, I mean, next month in this avenue, we're talking about authenticity, and nothing drives our team crazier than seeing people put together all of these shiny concepts just to market, have no depth, they're shallow deep. But obviously it's a bugbear. Lloyd, you seem really passionate about this. Would you like to join our committee at the Business Centre and represent as a stakeholder?
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Cool, thank you. If anyone else would like to, just come up and chat to me at the end of today or tonight. Steve.
What are some of the top ranked countries in the world?
The usual Scandinavian countries, smash it pretty well. I don't think there's any surprises in there. Usually the ones in Europe are going really well. Like Ken said, I don't think America
Singapore,
is doing well.
really well.
Right. Okay.
wow.
Yep.
Out in front of Europe.
Yep.
Ah,
There you go.
Yeah, as I understand it, that my information's probably 6 months or poll.
Yeah. Cool.
From what I read.
pretty current.
Singapore.
But there's a massive bias there, obviously, as well, in terms of how wealthy a country is.
Sure. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see where countries like Bhutan is. I don't know. Do you remember, Ken, where Bhutan is in the ranking? They sort of have to have a look. Steve, not sure.
Yeah. And guys, after tonight, we've set up a closed Facebook group just called Business Fusion Group. Feel free to jump on and join that, and we'll just accept and let you in. And that's for you guys to continue this conversation. We'll bop in all the resources that Jonathan shared with us, all of these incredible links, and you can access it that way. So it's just a way for you guys to stay connected as well. And it ties into the reciprocity circle that we'll do later.
And I completely understand how much pressure you're all under, and how lack of resources that you have. But I have talked to a number of people at SMEs who've used the Action Manager, and they say it's really easy, it's really simple, and it's not too time consuming, and they love it. So.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Sorry.
Sorry to
No, please, please.
possibly to add to your business benefits, I don't know whether you covered it there, but there's now an inextricable link between share price and sustainability and transparency.
Mm.
So as soon as an organisation implements SDGs and starts to report transparently, it's proven that 45% of organisations will accelerate their share price more than those that don't.
Wow.
Okay, so
Yep.
inextricably linked. Plus there's 645 organisations around the world now who are set up to audit organisations' sustainability reporting, including the major agencies.
Yeah,
So we
right.
are progressing towards being able to say, that's bullshit, or that's
Yeah,
what's
that's
up.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Good point. And yeah, if you're looking to get your business to a point where you're looking for a large amount of investment, then those investors will favourably look upon the SDG process and the communication that and reports and metrics that you've provided them. Yeah.
And sorry to use the business centre as an example again, it's just obviously proximity, but in our recent spate of tender applications that we've done that we go through every 3 to 5 years for funding for our programs, that was something they wanted to know about this time round, and it's the first year that was the case, that they wanted to go into detail on it. So it's 100% important in that regard. That was state and federal government.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Sorry, I think, Lloyd, did you say something?
Yeah, where does you were talking about the potentially trillions of dollars going into this investment. Where's the investment coming from? Is it from the government? Is it from the big corporates?
Yeah, big corporates or the superannuation funds, private investors. I mean, I was having a chat to an investment consortium called SDGx last week, and they're purely focused on initiatives that will help solve the problems around SDGs and have, I'm not too sure who their partners are, but they're multi-billions of dollars looking to invest, and they were looking to invest in the Hunter region as well.
Okay.
Sorry.
Those documents there, they just freely available online.
Yeah.
Or we can get
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
Google SDG Compass and SDG Action Manager, they'll pop up.
Yeah. We'll chuck them in a link for you too. But
You were saying that the Hunter has a focus area. So what were those focus areas? So we kind of skip through them.
Only because we haven't done it yet. So yeah. So we're working through that process. Yep. So hopefully it's something we'll over the next 4 months, and then. But that's just the targets and the indicators. That's kind of the hard data part. Then you have to build a narrative around that. So how do you actually connect people with the hard data with a story? Yeah.
what's the best way for people to stay connected to that group?
Yeah, sure. If you hop on the Hunter SDG Task Force website, and the link will be in the notes that get sent around. You register your interest. You can put yourself forward for committing your support to the SDGs in the Hunter.
Right. Ben?
Is it across the Hunter, or is it different between local government areas?
No, so it's just the 10 local government areas of the Hunter from Lake Mac up until Upper Hunter. Yep, all 10 of them. Yeah.
Great.
So the problem we really had is actually trying to get information on this. And so a lot of the folk who have data are government related or big business related, and they
Don't share it. Yeah.
So, our little thing we do probably touches on 10 or 11 of those 17 things. But to do even things like on the screen becomes essentially impossible even in our own little town, because we've spent so one of our primary areas of involvement is homelessness.
Yep.
And we can't even find out what the problem is in our own little town.
Yeah.
Because I think no one knows, but also accessing the information that is there, maybe we're doing it the wrong way, but it appears to be an impossible task. So we're really struggling to even get to a decision-making process, because again, for us, we're a bit unique. we don't have a resource problem. Whether you do the resource, when you can't, like, we need to understand what does Newcastle need. I can literally do something about it.
Yeah.
But what does Newcastle need? Seems like a simple question, but and I'm being very selfish, sorry folks, but
No, it's fine.
you know,
Yeah.
it's close to impossible to work out unless maybe we engage our own research, which
That was a
is
big
gonna be
reason. Yeah.
dollars.
So, sorry, go.
Yeah, it was a big reason why the task force got together in the first place, because everyone was independently experiencing that same thing. And it's just like, oh, come on, we have to do something about this.
So if you want to be involved, so over the next 4 months we'll be engaging the University of Newcastle to identify what are the probably top 50 to 70 indicators for the region, and that will include homelessness, and gather the data on that. Obviously not all the data is going to be available. If you want to be involved in that process, send me an email. But following that, we'll be sending it out more broadly to say, hey, here's the data we were able to gather. Here's the gaps, and this is what we need to do in the future, and then seeking your feedback on that.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Are there any other questions? Rich?
Well, it seems to me that part of this SDG process is also to figure out which data you don't have. Right?
Yep.
It actually doesn't surprise me that some, maybe homelessness in the local area maybe does surprise me a little bit, but
Yeah.
the data we should have.
Or the figures are grossly inaccurate, because
Yeah.
they don't pick up a lot of the people who are homeless. Yep. Yeah.
In terms of the SDG task force, do you guys create templates or things like that that businesses can use to identify the targets that they have for the goals, or what kind of things can businesses do? Can they use anything from the task force?
Sorry, go, Brooke.
Sorry. There's a truckload of stuff that Jonathan's given us that we'll share tonight, and also a couple of our advisors on our team are putting together a really practical hands-on toolbox. It's probably about 2 months away in production, but yeah, we're putting that together so it's practical. But it comes from everything that Jonathan's saying and providing. We're just going to sort of tweak that to the micro and small a bit more.
But we rely heavily on what the UN's already created.
Yeah.
No point reinventing the wheel. We sort of just direct you in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and you sent a link to a great course too.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was like a 9-hour online course that you could do. So I'll make sure I put that link in too. It's fantastic. Any other questions, guys? Nick?
I'm just wondering from a marketing point of
Yes.
view, whether there is like, in promoting the fact that you are, trying to fulfil these SDGs, whether there's like a logo or something like that that you could use that's associated, given there's no accreditation, is there something that, from a visual point of view, someone could put on their website, in their tender documents and the like?
Definitely. Yeah. So if you go to the UN SDG website, even if you Google even if you Google use of logo, I think it comes up with actually the recommendations for how you can use the symbol or whatever it is. And there's a certain way they want you to convey that and use their material. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Josh, you had a question.
Jonathan, what about doing? I can't head back down. I haven't worked out how to word it. But,
Oh, sorry, Josh.
what if you're trying to do good in one goal that potentially has implications on another one?
Yeah, great
So
question.
How do you manage? I don't have an example off the top of my head, but how do you manage perhaps improving educational outcomes as part of one of the goals? But if that also has a flow-on effect in a negative way of one of the other ones, how do you assess that and manage that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the pretty clear one is doing all the work in the other goals.
Or locally, actually, affordable energy, which
Yeah.
might be coal, but obviously
Yeah.
then has a climate impact.
Totally. Yeah. And a lot of the actions on all the other goals will have potentially a negative impact on climate change as well. Yes, completely agree. This is one of the reasons why they created the goals this way, to show that they are all interlinked. But when you go through that priority assessment using your stakeholders, you do need to you have to be honest. You have to say, yes, we are doing amazingly in this area, but what we are doing to resolve this issue is having a negative impact on this area.
Yeah.
And if the negative impact is large enough, you need to be honest and report on that. Yeah, I'm not too sure. And then you have to go about and finding a way of how you can
Mitigate that.
one at the same time. Yeah. Go, Ken.
Please.
Come and see Ken. Yeah.
Great. Did you want to share your name to the group?
I'm Ken Garrett.
Thank you.
I'm a startup, a founder of a startup software company in Newcastle. We've got a thing called a decision support tool.
Oh, I need that for my whole life.
It was principally aimed at developing transformation portfolios for large organisations, but it's capable of doing things like helping you buy a house.
Yeah.
Okay, so you name all your criteria, like your sustainable development goals, you go through a prioritisation process, and using the software, and the software will give you the highest value sequence that you might be able to execute things or the things that you might do.
That's interesting.
So it'll integrate with everything that Jonathan's got.
Yep.
Jonathan's organisation, hopefully will have a run through it sometime very soon, and hopefully they'll be then saying, go and talk to Ken.
He's got your number.
He's already called me. Yeah.
Love it. Were there any other questions? Yeah, Richard.
Maybe more a comment like this that if you're doing good on some of the SDGs, that might have a negative effect on the other one, and of course affordable clean energy is a prime one. That's of course the key reason why the low-income countries have a little bit more time to go to net zero than the high-income countries, right? Because we'd like to say we need to go to net zero in 2050, but we're a high-income country. Right? We should go there earlier.
Yeah, as in because we've had such a huge amount of historical emissions where we have a moral obligation to get there sooner. Is that what you're saying? Or
No, but also because some countries, like under it's my understanding at least, right? But with more talking climate change here than SDGs specifically, that the agreement is that some developing countries can still emit a little bit until 2060, right? And
right.
That some other countries, right, then stop emitting in say 2040.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right? And that of course has a flow-on effect on this.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I'm unfamiliar with in terms of where the countries have all agreed that their projections are accepted. But yeah, there's a great variance in what different countries have to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not sure if we have any other questions. What we might do is thank Jonathan for his time. And